I was 44 when my husband, Mark, came home smelling like sandalwood and guilt, a combination I would later learn belonged to his new friend from the gym, a 28-year-old influencer named Kylie who thought she was doing me a favor by liberating him from his midlife misery. But let me back up. Mark and I met in our early 30s when we were both trying to outrun the worst parts of our 20s. He had just declared bankruptcy after a failed motorcycle business, and I was crawling out of the wreckage of a toxic relationship that drained my savings and self-worth in equal measure. We met at a volunteer event at a local shelter in Raleigh, North Carolina, where his ease with people and unshakable optimism pulled me in like gravity. We married a year later, bought a modest home in the outskirts of town, and built a life that, for over a decade, felt unshakably secure. I ran a small interior design business from home, and he eventually got into real estate. First just helping a buddy flip a duplex, then parlaying that into a series of successful investment properties. For the last 7 years, he'd been obsessed with the dream car, a restored 1969 Dodge Charger that he said represented everything he worked for. He poured money into it, chrome finishes, custom paint job, engine mods I didn't even pretend to understand, and parked it like a trophy in our garage, practically sleeping next to it, while I was relegated to the other side of the bed with a man who touched the steering wheel more lovingly than he did me. At first, I chalked up his emotional distance to work stress. Our friends, especially Liz, my best friend since high school, kept telling me something felt off. "He doesn't look at you anymore, Sam," she said at a wine night while our friend group sat around my deck. There was also Nate, our next-door neighbor and single dad of 2 girls, who'd been my workout buddy and confidant ever since his divorce. He once half-jokingly said, "If Mark ever slips up, I'm first in line." I laughed it off. But then there was the late-night texting, the sudden interest in grooming, the workouts that lasted 4 hours and left him with glitter on his cheekbone. I confronted him one night after finding a receipt for a dinner at a restaurant we never went to, complete with a $200 wine bottle neither of us could pronounce. He admitted it without flinching. "I love her," he said, like he was ordering takeout. "You've just become predictable." Predictable. That word splintered something deep in me, something that had held our marriage up like steel beams. He moved out a week later, not into a dingy apartment or a hotel, but into Kylie's sleek downtown condo with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows and a rent payment he could barely afford. She was all over his social media, filtered selfies, motivational captions, her legs draped over his lap like I never existed. I grieved like someone had died, and maybe someone had. The version of myself that believed love could withstand time, comfort, and unshaven legs. But then something unexpected happened. My grief turned into rage, and that rage started to shape itself into a plan. It started with small things, updating my will, changing the house deed. He'd signed it over to me years ago for tax reasons, removing him as an emergency contact. Then I called Jen, my accountant, who also happened to be my college roommate, and the most financially ruthless person I knew. She was horrified but intrigued. "You want to gut him legally?" she asked, raising one brow like a cartoon villain. "No," I replied. "I want to make him regret ever thinking I was predictable." Over the next few weeks, I began to untangle our finances. Mark had never paid attention to the nitty-gritty, bank accounts, asset titles, credit cards, all of which I had full or partial access to. And that car? The one he worshipped more than he ever worshipped me? It was technically still registered under a joint LLC we created when his credit was trash. I owned 51% of it. So while he posed with Kylie at car meets and showed off his ride, I quietly contacted a lawyer. The legal route would take time, but there was another, quicker avenue, the DMV. I had paperwork proving my majority stake and a friendly clerk named Angela who walked me through everything with a gleam in her eye after hearing my story. "Girl, you better take that man to church," she said, stamping the title with finality. The next week, while Mark was on some yoga retreat with Kylie, documented in nauseating detail on Instagram, I had the Charger picked up by a flatbed tow truck and driven straight to a classic car auction in Charlotte. I didn't even need the money, but when it sold for $147,000, I smiled like I'd just won the lottery. I used part of the cash to pay off my mortgage and the rest to open a retirement account and take Liz, Nate, and Jen on a weekend getaway to Asheville, where we drank wine in hot tubs and toasted to being unpredictable. When Mark returned and saw the empty garage, he lost his mind. He showed up at my door red-faced, screaming about property theft and betrayal. Like irony wasn't a language he understood. I calmly handed him the legal paperwork, watching the moment his face collapsed as he realized he'd signed everything away. Kylie dumped him 2 weeks later when she found out he was broke and carless. He tried crawling back with apologies and nostalgia, but I was already dancing with Nate at Liz's birthday party, wearing a new dress I bought with part of the car money. I wasn't just free, I was thriving. And all it took was a title, a signature, and finally remembering who the hell I was. I thought revenge would feel like fireworks, like a scream echoing off the walls of justice. But instead it felt like quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm flattens everything you thought you needed and leaves just enough space for something new to grow. After selling Mark's beloved Charger and watching him implode like a sad little star collapsing in on itself, I didn't expect to hear from him again. But narcissists don't vanish, they linger. He started small. Voicemails with fake nostalgia, text messages at 2 a.m. claiming he missed our home, and, most insultingly, a sad bouquet of gas station roses left on my porch like a child's apology note scrawled in crayon. I ignored it all. I wasn't the same woman who once cried over a late dinner or begged him to hold my hand in public. No, now I was the woman who turned his prized possession into my pension fund. I focused on healing. Therapy helped, especially Dr. Ramona, who didn't sugarcoat anything. "You didn't just lose a man," she said during one session, peering at me over her glasses. "You lost an illusion. And sometimes that's harder to grieve." I started redecorating the house not because I needed new furniture, but because every throw pillow and rug was a declaration. This is mine now. I refinished the hardwood floors, turned the garage, formerly his temple of torque and tailpipes, into a home yoga studio, and finally finished the sunroom we always said we'd get around to. Liz called it post-divorce Sencor. Nate helped, too. He installed new lights, brought over tools, shared beers on the porch while his daughters, Becca and Jules, played tag on my lawn. The girls adored me. They called me Aunt Sam and asked if I'd come to their school play. I said yes without hesitation. Something about being around a functional, loving father reset my compass. And then, like a roach emerging from beneath the fridge, Mark filed a lawsuit. Not for the car. He knew that was a losing battle, but for emotional distress and loss of shared assets. Jen nearly spit her coffee when I told her. "You mean the assets he abandoned when he left you for a gym bimbo who can't spell fiduciary?" Her words, not mine, but I wasn't arguing. The thing is, Mark had made one critical mistake beyond cheating. He underestimated the paper trail. While he was busy doing yoga with Kylie and playing house in a condo he couldn't afford, I kept every receipt, every email, every legal document from the past 12 years. I built a counter lawsuit that was as airtight as it was humiliating. Turns out, Kylie had posted quite a few luxury lifestyle TikToks while they were still together, showing off furniture I bought, jewelry he gave her that he'd borrowed from my safe, even a video where she bragged about taking over someone else's life. My lawyer, Grace, a bulldog in heels who once sued a plastic surgeon for giving her client resting botch face, included the videos in our countersuit. The deposition was delicious. Mark sat there, red and sweating, while Grace read off receipts like a DJ dropping a beat. He tried to argue, stammering about emotional needs and compatibility, while I sat there in a cream blazer, sipping water, the very picture of controlled vengeance. The court ruled in my favor, twice. Not only did he have to pay my legal fees, but he lost any remaining claim to our joint properties, which I sold 2 months later for a hefty profit. When he tried to delay payments, Grace hit him with a lien so fast his head spun. Suddenly, the man who once called me predictable was living in his sister's basement, carless, credit-tanked, and girlfriendless. Because, surprise, Kylie had moved on to some tech bro who sponsored her new podcast. I'll admit, a small part of me felt pity. But it vanished the moment I saw him outside my house one evening, leaning against a borrowed car, trying to look casual. "Sam," he called out as I stepped outside to check my mail. "I messed up. I thought she was," he trailed off, "different. I finished for him. No, she was exactly what you wanted. And now you're exactly where you belong." I turned and walked away. Later that week, I booked a solo trip to Italy, a gift to myself, paid for in full with what remained of the charger money. It was on that trip, while sipping wine in a vineyard in Tuscany, that I realized revenge wasn't the loud, dramatic spectacle I once imagined. It was in the silence of my phone not ringing, in the freedom of being the only voice that mattered in my life, and in the sheer absurdity of watching a man destroy his own castle because he thought the grass was greener on a rented rooftop. When I got back, I launched a new design studio, focused on post-divorce transformations. Liz joined as my assistant. Nate helped build my website. We called it Second Wind Interiors. In business, it boomed. Turns out, a lot of women wanted to reclaim their space after someone tried to erase them from it. Mark eventually left town, defeated, broke, and out of second chances. But me? I was just getting started. 3 years have passed since I sold Mark's car out from under him and watched his empire of ego crash like a cheap drone. You'd think time would dull the edge of satisfaction, but honestly, it's aged like wine. After the court win and the Italy trip, my life didn't just rebound, it evolved. Second Wind Interiors became something bigger than I ever imagined. We started small, just me, Liz, and a handful of determined clients who needed more than furniture, they needed freedom. But word spread. Local papers did a feature. Then a divorce podcast picked us up. Now we've got a wait list 3 months long, a studio downtown, and our own little tribe of women, and a few men, who come in with heartbreak and leave with hardwood, plants, and power. Nate? He never left. It wasn't one of those rebound things either. It was slower, steadier. It started with a smile over dinner, turned into a habit of Sunday pancakes with his girls, and somewhere in the quiet between paint samples and porch swings, it became love. Real love. The kind that doesn't need to be proved on Instagram or defended in court. We moved in together last fall. The girls helped me pack the last boxes from my old house, which I sold to a sweet couple just starting out, full circle, I guess. Now we live in a restored farmhouse outside Durham, with creaky stairs, big windows, and a front porch that catches the best sunsets I've ever seen. I never imagined I'd be this happy, this whole, or this free from the bitterness I once clung to like a shield. But here's the twist ending, the final cherry on top. A few months ago, Mark sent me a friend request. No message. Just the request. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds before hitting delete. Not block. Not accept. Just delete. Because I realized he doesn't deserve even a piece of this new life. Not even the satisfaction of knowing I forgave him. My revenge wasn't just taking the car, or winning in court, or watching him unravel. My real revenge was becoming the version of myself he was too small to imagine. The kind of woman who doesn't need to scream to be heard. The kind of woman who wakes up with purpose, peace, and people who actually matter. So no, I didn't get even. I got better. And that's the most dangerous thing a woman like me can ever be.